3 days after my father died, Captain Mason Quinn still hadn't shown his face once. I stood outside the village chief's house with a suitcase whose edges were worn smooth from too many quiet departures. Rain drifted like ash through the late afternoon, and the smell of wet earth filled my lungs like a memory I couldn't swallow. "Mr. Carter," I said, tightening my fingers around the handle until my knuckles went white. My voice came out oddly calm, as if it belonged to someone braver than me. "I've thought it through. I'm staying. I'll take over Dad's classes. I'll teach the kids until they don't need me anymore." He stared at me the way adults look at a child about to walk into a storm on purpose. Then he sighed, fished a cigarette from his pocket, and thought better of lighting it in front of me. "You foolish girl," he murmured. "You followed your husband into the military compound, suffered for years, finally got a stable life. And you want to come back to this poor little place and bury your youth." I didn't answer. I lowered my gaze to the watch on my wrist. The metal casing was scratched bare, almost all the paint worn off, but the second hand kept circling with stubborn patience. It was the only thing my father had left me. "I'm not afraid of hardship," I said, a thin smile tugging at my mouth. "I'm afraid I'll live my whole life without doing one thing he would have been proud to see. I'll give it 7 days. If Mason still doesn't come by then, I'll file for divorce myself." That night at 7, I dragged my suitcase back into the family housing inside the base. The old iron door groaned open. The apartment was dark, lit only by a weak yellow ceiling bulb that made everything look tired. The meal I had left on the table a week ago, the day I ran home, was still there, untouched. The soup had soured. Grease clung to the plates and smelled like rancid apology. It looked exactly the way it had in the moment I'd fled. Like time had frozen out of spite. I set my luggage down. Then came the crisp cadence of military footsteps in the hallway. The door swung wide. Mason entered in full uniform, every crease perfect, his epaulets shining as if grief couldn't reach him. He pulled off his cap and spoke before his eyes fully found my face. "Is there anything to eat?" he asked, as casually as if he were checking the weather. "The mess hall's closed. Warm something up for me. I'm taking it to Clara. She's been sick for days. Can't cook." I turned slightly and caught my reflection in the glass of the cabinet door. Messy hair, pale face, shadows under my eyes like bruises. I looked like someone who had been holding her breath for too long. "I just got back," I said slowly. "I haven't made anything." Mason frowned, finally glancing at the table and the ruined food. He didn't ask where I'd gone. He didn't ask why I looked like a ghost. He just rolled up his sleeves and walked into the kitchen, as if the chaos in this home had nothing to do with him. That was the moment it truly settled in. However many times he'd thought of his first love's health today, he had thought of his wife that many times, which was to say, not once. I leaned against the doorframe and watched him fumble eggs into a bowl, pour noodles into boiling water. 5 years of marriage. And this was the first time I'd ever seen Mason voluntarily step into the kitchen. And it wasn't for me. Clara Jennings had returned to Cloudridge City after her divorce, and every change in Mason since then had orbited her like she was the sun. None of it had ever revolved around me. He packed the noodles into an aluminum container, snapped the lid shut, and headed for the door. When he passed, I stepped sideways and blocked him. "In a few days I need to go back to my hometown," I said, pulling a sheet of paper from my bag. "White paper. Black ink. Sign here for me. I need it for the paperwork." I held it up. "Divorce petition." Stamped across the top. Empty except for the space reserved for the husband's signature. Mason paused for a single heartbeat. His eyes slid over the words so quickly you might have mistaken it for accident. Then he took the pen and signed in one swift stroke, the way he signed meaningless reports. "When Clara feels better, I'll request leave and go with you to visit your dad properly," he said, almost as an afterthought. "She's been sick. I'm busy." I lowered my head so my hair could hide the sting rising in my eyes. Sure, I whispered. When he brushed past, his scent hit me. Soft and floral. Expensive lotion. The kind Clara used. I knew because once, smiling sweetly, she'd waved the jar in front of me and said, "It's pricey. You probably wouldn't buy it for yourself, would you?" She was right. The iron gate outside slammed with a brutal finality. Silence flooded the apartment again. I walked to the table, smoothed the divorce petition carefully, as if it were something fragile, folded it, and tucked it neatly into my bag like a blade I'd finally decided to carry. A week earlier, Mr. Carter had called me while I was preparing lesson plans. "Evelyn," he'd said, voice shaking, "I have to tell you. Your father collapsed in class. Brain hemorrhage. They're operating. Can you come home?" My hands had trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone. Mason was adjusting his uniform, ready to leave. I grabbed his sleeve like it was the last solid thing in the world. "Can you come with me?" I begged. "My dad is in surgery." "My dad," Mason repeated, eyebrow lifting, already halfway away. Then a woman's voice floated down the corridor, gentle and sweet. "Mason," Clara called. She leaned against the doorway with an easy smile, like she belonged there. "Hurry up. You promised you'd take me shopping today. Don't ditch me." The moment he heard her name, Mason yanked his arm from my grip like it burned. "I'm busy," he said without looking at me. "Go first. If I have time, I'll come." If I have time. 7 days later, my father was gone. From the emergency room to the funeral home, from coffin to grave, from wreaths to ashes. I never got his, "if I have time." The only thing I got was my father's hand crushing mine, eyes already fading, still defending the man who had abandoned us. "Mason is a good man," my father had whispered. "He serves the country. Don't blame him." I nodded through tears, because I couldn't break my father's last belief. I couldn't tell him that Mason wasn't busy at the border, wasn't marching through drills. He was busy strolling through stores, choosing dresses, laughing with Clara. When my father's eyes finally closed, that last request, "don't blame him," latched around my heart like a cold lock. But the second the lid came down, I knew something else too. One day, I would open it myself. I returned to the base, already counting down, the ticking inside me as dry and steady as my father's old watch. 6 days left, and I was no longer anyone's captain's wife, not even in my own life. That was why, when I later stood at the little co-op shop, and the clerk chirped, smiling, "Captain Quinn bought 5 jars of that lotion last week. He must adore you." I simply looked her in the eyes and said, softly, "Give me one." "For a gift?" she asked. "No," I replied, feeling the cold jar in my palm and something warmer, sharper, waking in my chest. "For me." By the time I reached the school office and saw my desk buried under Clara's lipstick and silk scarves, my notebooks crushed beneath her new name, I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I just cleared her things to the floor, one item at a time, like sweeping a lie out of my own space. And when her heel hooked my ankle and I hit the tiles hard enough to split my skin, blood blooming bright against grey, I discovered a terrifying kind of calm. Because I knew, with certainty, so clean it almost felt like peace. None of this would matter to me for much longer. The last night before I left, I cooked a proper table of food, a farewell dinner for the men who used to call me sister-in-law, with warm, careless smiles. I carried out the final dish. And from the living room, I heard the roar of laughter. "Come on, Captain Quinn, share a crossed cup toast with Miss Jennings." "Yeah, one drink. Consider it a welcome back to the unit." Someone laughed too loudly, the kind of laugh that wanted an audience. "Don't be shy. We're not strangers here. If Teacher Hale hadn't rushed into marriage back then, Captain Quinn wouldn't have been dragged into those miserable matchmaking dinners. Besides, Teacher Hale isn't even here. What's there to be awkward about? The sentence slid across my spine like a thin blade. I stepped out with a steaming bowl of soup in my hands. The heat fogged my vision, but inside me, everything went colder than dishwater. Only days ago, these same mouths had fought to call me sister-in-law, had nudged their bowls toward me for more meat, more broth, more warmth I kept giving because I thought kindness could stitch a life together. Now, it only made me nauseous. Mason slammed his glass onto the table. His face darkened. He looked like he wanted to say something, but I cleared my throat softly and placed the soup in the center like a quiet gavel. "Eat," I said, smiling without warmth. "Food tastes worse when it's cold." I pulled out my chair to sit. Mason's eyes swept the dishes as if he'd just noticed my work at all, and his brow tightened. "Why did you make so many things Clara can't eat?" he asked, a thin edge of accusation cutting through his voice. Clara waved her hand at once, obedient and gentle. "It's fine. I can just have vegetables," she said with a small smile, lowering her head. "Evelyn didn't mean to." Her words were soft, but her eyes glistened, the corners reddening just enough to look wounded. The air at the table shifted instantly. A few young soldiers exchanged glances and swallowed their jokes. Mason stood up so abruptly his chair hit the wall with a sharp clack. The decision was already made on his face. "I'll take you to the state restaurant," he told Clara, firm and protective. "They have what you like." "Wait." My voice cut through the room like a match striking. Silence snapped into place. Every gaze turned toward me. I reached for the bottle and poured myself a full glass. Clear liquid trembled inside cheap glass. Mason stared, openly startled. In 5 years, he'd never seen me drink in front of him. Not once. This one. I lifted the glass to eye level, my smile barely there, "is for all of you." The liquor burned its way down my throat. It was harsh enough to make me cough, harsh enough to drag tears to the corners of my eyes. My chest lit up like a small fire, and yet, strangely, something inside me loosened, as if I'd finally cut one invisible thread. Mason moved on instinct, stepping closer, hand reaching as if to pat my back. "What are you doing? Don't drink so much." I stepped away before his palm could land, lowering my head as if busying myself, letting my hair hide the redness in my eyes. His hand froze mid-air, nowhere to go. He dropped it slowly. His expression turned uglier, as if my refusal had embarrassed him. "Evelyn Hale," he ground out. "You really don't know how to behave." He tossed the words over his shoulder and turned, already guiding Clara toward the door. The others rose quickly too, murmuring excuses, scattering like men who sensed a sudden drop in temperature and didn't want to be blamed for the weather. Within minutes, the yard was mine alone. Under the weak yellow porch light, I ate the farewell dinner by myself. The meat cooled. The soup went flat. The greens wilted. I still took each bite slowly, as if I were chewing through the last years of my own foolish hope, swallowing them one mouthful at a time. 4 hours until the train. I went to the back garden and pulled up every vegetable I'd planted season after season. I divided them into 2 baskets and knocked on my neighbours' doors, one on each side. "Still fresh," I told them with a polite smile. "If you can't finish, you can pickle the rest. I'm leaving. No one will tend them." 3 hours. I washed the bowls, dried the table, and placed 2 things on it, like a final sentence. The first was the divorce approval stamped in red. The second was the scented cream jar I'd opened, used exactly once. I stared at them for a long time. 2 endings. One for my marriage, one for the stupid, stubborn part of me that had kept waiting. 2 hours. I carried my luggage to the unit vehicle. Night had fully settled, and the wind was colder than I expected. The young driver glanced back at me with a bright grin, assuming this was another short leave like all the other times. "Teacher Hale, going back home again. How long this time?" I took a few fruit candies from my pocket and handed them over. "I don't know," I said lightly. "Maybe forever." He laughed, thinking I was joking. "Then when you come back, tell Captain Quinn to call me. I'll pick you up. Long road, but I'm used to driving." I nodded once. I didn't correct him. Inside me, a softer voice answered in farewell. "There won't be a next time." At 8, Mason returned with Clara and a few of the men from earlier. A noisy little parade carrying paper bags of roasted meat and beer. Smoke and grease and laughter braided together at the doorway. "Teacher Hale, we're back," one of them called, pushing the door open. The apartment was dark. No light. Only the faint, stale trace of the dinner I'd left behind. He fumbled for the switch. White light flooded the room. Empty. No woman. No suitcase. No coat on the hook. No breath in the air. "Did she go out?" the soldier mumbled, scratching his head. He set the food on the table, then stopped when he noticed a neatly folded paper placed in the center, like an accusation. He picked it up, frowned, unfolded it, and went rigid. His throat bobbed. He turned too fast, voice cracking as he called out, "Captain Quinn! She left you a letter. It's a divorce petition." Mason was still helping Clara inside, still half smiling at something someone said. He didn't fully register it at first. The soldier tried again, swallowing hard, eyes flicking to Mason's face like he feared the man might explode. "Sir," he stammered. "On the table. It's a divorce petition. From Teacher Hale." This time, every word landed. Mason's hand, which had been resting at Clara's waist, dropped as if the strength had been cut out of it. His fingers twitched once. Not anger yet. Something worse. A delayed understanding. Clara, in high heels, caught the edge of the rug and twisted her ankle, stumbling with a sharp little cry. "Ow! Mason!" She reached for him by reflex, expecting the usual steadying hand. He didn't turn. Mason moved like a man shoved forward. He pushed past the cluster of bodies in the living room and seized the soldier by the collar, dragging him close until their faces were a breath apart. "What did you say?" Mason demanded, voice low and lethal. "Say it again." The room suffocated into silence. The soldier's mouth went dry. He forced the words out anyway. "Ma'am, she left it on the table." Mason released him and strode to the table. The folded paper lay there, lonely and bright against the clean wood. He picked it up with a shaking hand and opened it. Termination of marriage. His own signature stared back at him, bold and familiar. Beside it, mine steady, careful, final. Clara limped closer, face pale, still trying to look fragile and deserving. "Mason, my ankle." This time, his reaction was not tenderness. He yanked his arm away so sharply she lost her balance. She fell hard onto the floor with a choked cry, pain finally real enough to warp her expression. Mason didn't look down. He crushed the paper in his fist until the edges crumpled, knuckles bleaching white. "I need to see the commissar," he said, hoarse. And then he walked straight past Clara's body on the tiles as if she were invisible. Behind him, her voice rose, frantic, calling his name again and again. He only moved faster, almost running, as if the thing he was trying to escape wasn't Clara's cries. But the moment he'd finally realised the woman he thought would wait forever had already left. Mason Quinn snapped his head up so fast the lamplight caught in his eyes. They were bloodshot, veined with red like cracked glass. the look of a man balancing on the edge of something feral. Grace Warren hesitated. The sharp amusement that had been sitting in her gaze drained away, replaced by something colder and more careful. "You truly didn't know?" she asked quietly. "I told someone to pass the message to you. I was very clear." Mason's stare narrowed, ice hard. The kind of killing calm that used to settle over him on the training grounds slid back into place. "Who?" he said. The word fell heavy. "Who did you ask to tell me?" Even Commissar Warren turned to his wife, his expression tightening. Grace pressed her lips together, then stood abruptly and went upstairs. Footsteps, a door opening, a small, protesting whine. Moments later she returned, one hand on the shoulder of a boy about 7 or 8, hair sticking up in a sleep-tousled mess, eyes still glazed with dreams. Noah Warren blinked at the adults as if he'd walked into the wrong world. "Noah," Grace said, her voice turning sharp with authority. "A few days ago, Teacher Hale called. She said her father had passed and told Captain Quinn to go home immediately. I was busy and couldn't go myself, so I asked you to deliver the message. Did you go?" The boy's lower lip trembled. He glanced at his mother's face, saw it wasn't a game, and swallowed hard. I went," he whispered. "I went to Uncle Quinn's office first." Commissar Warren leaned forward. "Did you see Captain Quinn there, Noah?" Noah shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I only saw Miss Jennings. She said Uncle Quinn stepped out to buy food. She asked what I needed, so I told her." Something in Mason's chest seemed to drop, as if the floor beneath his ribs had vanished. His face went darker, heavier, like ink spreading through water. "And then?" he asked, voice rasping. "What happened? After?" Noah flinched and half hid behind his mother, words tripping over each other. "Miss Jennings told me to go home for dinner. She said she would tell Uncle Quinn for me, and she gave me a bag of white milk candies and told me not to tell anyone about it." The boy's voice broke. Tears flooded his eyes. "I didn't want to go," he cried, "but she said if I was late I wouldn't get dinner. Mum, I'm sorry. Don't hit me, please." He clutched the back of his pants like he could already feel punishment, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. Grace Warren's face turned a hard, furious red. Commissar Warren's jaw flexed. He lifted Noah onto his lap, one big hand already catching the waistband as if he meant to teach a lesson that would stick. "Stop." Mason reached out and closed his hand over the commissar's wrist. His grip was firm, but controlled. When he looked up, his eyes had changed. The madness was gone. What remained was a deep, cold clarity. "Commissar Warren." "Mrs. Warren," he said, inhaling like he was dragging himself out of drowning water. "I want to hear Miss Jennings explain this. To my face." The commissar studied him for a beat, then gave a slow nod. There was no comfort in it, only judgment. "Fine," he said. "We'll go together." 9 p.m. The family housing area was nearly dark. The base settled into sleep. Wind slipped through the trees, carrying a thin bite of cold. Mason walked with the commissar and Grace, several soldiers trailing behind, each of them burdened by a different kind of shame. Outside the clinic, a few men still lingered in the hallway, sitting rigidly on benches or leaning against the wall, silent as stone. The moment they saw the commissar, they sprang to attention. "Where is Miss Jennings?" Commissar Warren asked without preamble. "I need her cooperation." A young soldier, Adam Zhao, stepped forward, throat bobbing. "Sir," she twisted her ankle. "She's inside, getting ointment." Mason didn't wait. He was the one who shoved the door open. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and sharp medicated balm. Clara Jennings sat on the bed with her pant leg rolled to her knee, a nurse wrapping gauze around her ankle. When she saw Mason, relief flashed across her face like a practiced sunrise. "Mason," she breathed. You came! Her smile froze. Mason stood in the doorway, arms hanging at his sides, fists clenched so tight his knuckles looked bone white. His gaze on her was not the gaze of a man who had been caring for her the past few days. It was a blade. "Clara Jennings!" he said, voice low and stripped of warmth. "I'm going to ask you one question." He stared straight into her eyes. "Did you know Evelyn Hale's father died?" The air in the room went rigid. Even the nurse's hands paused mid-rap. Clara's instincts kicked in. Deny, deflect, wrap herself back into softness. "What?" She laughed shakily, forcing confusion onto her face. "Why would you ask me that? Even you didn't know, so how could I possibly know?" She couldn't admit it. Not with this many witnesses. Not with leadership present. One confession would shatter the fragile glass statue she'd built of herself. The gentle teacher, the harmless woman, the one everyone should protect. Mason didn't blink. "You're sure?" he asked. "You're absolutely sure." Clara swallowed and turned her face away, avoiding his stare like it could peel the skin off her lies. "Of course," she whispered. "Mason, don't you trust me?" From behind Mason, Commissar Warren's voice landed like a hammer. "Comrade Jennings," he said, stepping into the room. "I've clearly underestimated you." Clara's head snapped around. The commissar entered with grace. Behind them stood Noah, gripping his mother's sleeve, and soldiers filled the hallway like a silent jury. Clara's colour drained. Grace's mouth curved into a thin, merciless line. "Last week," she said evenly, every word burning, "my son came to deliver a message to Captain Quinn. He told you Teacher Hale's father had died and that Captain Quinn needed to go home immediately. You sent him away. You promised you'd pass it on. You even gave him candy and told him to keep quiet." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Did that happen, Clara? Yes or no?" Clara's lips parted. No sound came out. No one moved to defend her. And for the first time, under the weight of all those steady, disbelieving eyes, the mask on her face began to crack.